Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Amanda Kovattana, who is a half-Thai, half-British lesbian who lives in the Bay Area right now, but she grew up in Thailand and then immigrated to the United States, came out as a lesbian and participated in the gay liberation movement, so-called, and now is very concerned about the gender ideology that is taking front and center stage of gay rights, so called. In this conversation, we talk about the history of Thailand and Thailand's relationship to gender and sexuality, which I find very fascinating because it touches on that concept of the third gender, or how other societies and cultures treat the gender non-conforming individual in a way that might be more healthy and more in line with reality than medicalization or the complete decimation of all gender roles and the recreation of reconfigured and perverted sex stereotypes that don't serve anything other than the so-called identity of those who are just different than other people. You can find Amanda's work and social media down there in the description. Without further ado, here is Amanda Kovattana. How's your 4th of July?
Oh, it was fun. I live in a mountain town, and every year they have a town picnic to raise money for the fire brigade.
Oh.
So everybody brings the food. The volunteers cook it, and then we buy a plate and load up. So everybody is in town comes, and we can chat and see our neighbors. It's a very eclectic assortment of people who want to live in a town that focus primarily on music culture, live music, and then so everybody has their reasons for living here, but not necessarily similar politics.
Oh yeah.
But it's all tolerated because we are very concerned about the fire security of this town. Being in California, we were evacuated at one point in 2021 because of the fires.
Yeah.
So that's quite a way to be bonded as a town and rise above the, in what is basically inconsequential beliefs.
Depending, I mean, sometimes they are consequential, sometimes not, but not as consequential as your fire's about to devour your house.
Right.
Puts things in perspective for sure. And do you run a little business up there, or you keep busy?
I'm
or
actually
you're an artist.
I'm a professional organizer.
Okay.
So I go to people's houses and help them set up systems and organize and go through their stacks and piles and decide what to throw out and what to keep.
What's the method? How do you know? How do you help them sort?
We have a discussion about what it is they must prioritize and find, and usually they don't realize that they've just kept everything. And when they see it, they go, "Oh, I don't need that."
Yeah.
So it's a good way to, as a writer, to observe how people really live and what their concerns are and what they carry in their mind to execute reality-based decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helpful psychologically to understand that, to work with people who have different ideas of just really basic things, how to stay organized, what to keep, what is history, what is memorabilia.
Do you help them with their schedules too, or just
Yes,
their
there is a time
space?
management.
Okay.
Time management is
yeah.
a component.
Yeah.
And people who want to be punctual and what you have to do to arrange your schedule, your priorities in order to be on time. And also, because they don't give time to organizing their stuff, it's part of my job to convince them that 10 minutes spent here, 5 minutes there, will save them huge, onerous tasks from all these things piling up.
Yeah.
So that's my bailiwick of skills, working with difficult people, with overwhelming situations, somewhat delusionary ideas about how much they can really save, how many books they can really have
Yeah.
in a limited space, that kind of thing.
How did you get into that? Did you just find that that was a talent of yours, or did you have to go through a great organization of yourself first?
Spatial, I was trained as a graphic artist. That was the only degree that I could find that would not involve living in the closet. This, I came of age in the 70s, and the 80s, homophobia was still at large. So in order to find a line of work that would not involve being in the closet, most professional work careers, lawyer, doctor, teacher especially, would involve being closeted. So I picked art, graphic art, which promised that I would have a career, and then I got to hang out with all the creative gay boys, mostly. And so having a spatial mind allowed, and I had a skill for space, for being able to visualize space and how to organize into those spaces. And that led to me wanting to hang a shingle out as a professional organizer. It was just beginning to be a career when I quit my graphic design job and decided to launch myself as an independent contractor. So I could do art and try to get jobs as an artist, graphics, but it is so competitive a field. It's so glamorous that everyone wants to, do the Apple logo. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley, where every 5 feet in Palo Alto, there is a graphic designer who did something really amazing for some startup, including the Apple logo with the bite out of it. So it was too much competition. And helping people get organized was much instantly rewarding, because then you leave a space better than when you got there. And people extremely grateful. So really, in order to be asked back to help further, that's all I had to do for that day. And then I could go home, not take my work home with me, and write, which was, my real avocation.
And that writing has always been your avocation?
I would say so. When I was growing up in Thailand, there were very few English books, and my mother's English, my father Thai. So I lived in the Thai language, and everything was in Thai, but my school language was English, and English books were hard to come by at that time. So I really treasured the English stories. My cultural heritage was a lot in English storybooks, children's books. So I wanted to tell the story of where I was. Mad dogs and Englishmen are always finding themselves in exotic places, and it was a thing to do to describe it. And that way I could be part of my English heritage while I was living my Thai heritage. So my first book was about growing up in Thailand and what that was like.
And what you said the 70s is when you were growing up, or?
Yes, I came to the States in 1968. So my coming of age was in the 70s, and young life was in the 80s, which was just at the time that the gay community were beginning to rev up the gay movement. And I had come out as a lesbian as soon as I hit college. I was already aware in high school that I would likely prefer girls.
So how did your parents meet?
How did my parents meet? In university. My father was of a privileged class who usually would send their children overseas to study at Western universities. And so he went to King's College in England to get his PhD in engineering, and he met my mother, who was getting her degree in psychology. Quite a contrast.
Yeah, two different modes of plugging into the world and constructing and deconstructing it.
Yes. My mother had a sense of adventure.
Yeah. So Thailand at that time when they're meeting, could you just fill in some of the historical details, like post-World War II? How did things shake out for Thailand after the conflict settled down?
It was very interesting because Thailand was occupied by the Japanese, and they built the Death Railway. They were forced, the Japanese forced the Allied prisoners and assorted Thai peasants to build the Death Railway, which is where we get the movie The Bridge Over the River Kwai.
Yeah, that's what flashed into my head.
Yes, and the Thais love to celebrate the bridge, the bombing of the bridge, and with a sound and light show at the actual bridge. So Thailand.
And what was that Death Bridge for? Was it for Chinese specifically?
It was for the Japanese to bring in supplies, I think, for the war.
Okay. And the war specifically, or their encroachment into China, or just the entire region?
They were encroaching into Southeast Asia.
Yeah, they just wanted the whole thing.
Because, well, Southeast Asia had lots of resources that weren't found elsewhere, like rubber, rice is our biggest export. So yes, there was lots to be had there, and the French and the English had colonized on either side of us, Burma and Cambodia. Thailand avoided being colonized.
Because it had a strong national sense of national destiny, or was it heavily fortified?
It had a very, very intelligent king this king was portrayed in the movie The King and I, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical,
Yeah.
which was banned in Thailand, and so was a recent remake banned.
Huh.
But anyway, this king, who is very intelligent and educated, he could see that if he did not modernize Thailand, then he would be overwhelmed by colonial forces. So he invited them to meet with him in his court, and he created relationships with them. So these they were rival colonials too. The French and the British and Portuguese were also there. So Thailand was kind of a meeting place where everybody could meet on neutral soil and negotiate. And because the Thai king willingly hosted them, he could then negotiate a position as a neutral country.
Yeah. The Geneva of the Orient.
Yeah, as opposed to the Venice of the East, which is a very common way of characterizing Bangkok.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it does give Thailand a uniquely indigenous heritage. Because we weren't colonized, we were open about our heritage, and we had Buddhism, and we kind of embraced the Christian missionaries. They built schools, and we took advantage of the schools. No one ever really converted. And that's how we sort of kept the peace. Thailand is unusual in that way.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, and then so it wagered itself. It navigated through the colonial period, and then the Japanese go apeshit, pardon my French, and they want to take over Southeast Asia, and so they occupy Thailand as well as several other places. And how did Thailand get through that? And then what was the result after World War II of surviving that and then reestablishing itself?
Yes, Thailand realized that they wouldn't have a chance against the Japanese if we took up arms. So we simply agreed to host them, but at the same time were very subversive and created an underground to help the Allies. So we were sort of playing both sides, in a sense. And the Japanese demanded that Thailand declare war against the British and the United States. And the ambassador in the United States took one look at that and said, "That's ridiculous." And he just quietly slips the order into his desk drawer and never did declare war against the US. I think the British ambassador followed those orders. So afterwards, Thailand was able to pick up negotiating on peaceful terms with the West.
Yeah. And do you know why it would have sided with the West as opposed to the communists after the shakeout?
Well, in World War II,
from China? Yeah.
the communists were not an issue. That wasn't until Vietnam War.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be occupied by the Japanese. But we couldn't fight them, so we had to root for the Allies.
Yeah.
It's an uneasy, for a small country with very little firepower or negotiating power. It's a very different dance.
Yes.
That has to be done.
And so when your parents they meet in I guess the 50s or 60s, early 60s, late 50s?
Yes, mid-50s, meeting at college. So my mother, who had gone through the bombing of London, she survived with a great sense of optimism, and she was the first of her family to go to college. So she really wanted to study psychology, how people's mind worked, how her family dynamics got that way. And my father, who was very much about taking apart everything as a child, was a natural for engineering. So he was top of his class in engineering. He was a very bright man, but rather, we would say he was on the autism spectrum, Asperger. So my mother would fill in for his inability to really suss out a social situation. So in that sense, they worked well together. And then after my dad got his degree, we went back to Thailand. I was born in that time between his master's degree and his PhD. And so I was 3 when we went back to Thailand.
Okay. Yeah. And how did their cultures meet? Was it was your mother and father, did they fit into each other? The British woman and the Thai gentleman? Did those cultures get along in a natural way?
Yes, because of the tradition of Thailand to have relationships with the West. The royal family had also sent their sons overseas, and one son came back with a Russian woman. And so a precedent had been set for these mixed marriages. As long as they were the son, the Thai man was bringing home a foreign wife. The other way around has a completely different social situation. Because during the Vietnam War, American soldiers were in Thailand. That was the closest port to launch their activities against Vietnam. So we were the downside of hosting the Americans was that we were the R&R capital, and thus the sex trade was massively expanded for the GIs.
Really? So when we think of Thailand or Bangkok as some sort of place where you go to get your R&R on, that was really established during the Vietnam War, during the 60s and the 70s?
Yes, it was actually established by the Japanese occupation.
Okay.
Because they had to have their comfort women. And so they established the original sex trade, and then the American being in Thailand really expanded it. And then, of course, we became known the world over for this horrible sex trade.
What is the general feeling from your point of view of Thailand toward that reputation of theirs? The hospitality with a happy ending, let's say.
Well, you mean how do we socially look at that?
Yeah,
as a culture.
Well, as a culture, reflecting on yourself, and then also reflecting on the reputation.
I think we mostly ignore it. We live next to it. You know, there's a street maybe half a mile from my house called Soy Cowboy, where all the girl bars are. And so we tolerate it. We know that it's a huge source of income. And there has been a lot of measures for educating on safe sex. It's still a real problem because the poor send their children to Bangkok.
Yeah.
And that's how it keeps going.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
This is a fraught topic, or I mean this in a respectful and open manner, but I believe the concept of the lady boy it revolves around, it kind of has roots in that sex trade culture in Thai. Am I correct or not? And what's the relationship of Thailand culture pre-sex trade and post-sex trade to homosexuality and to effeminate boys and to the lady boy?
Yeah. The lady boy, just to define, is a man who cross-dresses and lives as a woman. Maybe not full-time, maybe just part-time. And he is usually assumed to be gay. So that is part of what I call the third gender culture, or what is known now as third gender cultures. And it is a long time tradition, indigenous, you could say, going way back, that there would be cross-dressing men. Because I had gone to villages way outside of Thailand where no foreigners were. And I would see these cross-dressing men with their long hair, and they would be just doing jobs like they were the cashier at a restaurant, or they were even owners of the restaurant. So they had a place in society, and people tolerated them and accepted them. They accepted homosexuality. And that was the same as how my family saw it. So when I was a gender non-conforming child, they were like, okay, she has the spirit of a boy, and it's manifesting itself this way. And by that they mean that reincarnation, you are born into a different body every life, and your experience, your karmic experience, may have been as the opposite sex before. But now you've come to this life to learn what might be the lessons of being in the sex you were born in. So even though you have this inclination to cross-dress or to be interested in things that were associated with the other sex, you were still accepted and expected to accept that you had been born this life as, in my case, as a woman. So even though I was a rowdy tomboy who I liked to ride my bicycle right through the house, the part that was accessible, where the outdoor kitchen was, and ring my bell very loudly. And it was just a way that I expressed my sort of boyish tomboyishness. And I did all the tomboy thing, climbing trees and building things, making marbles from the mud, which was very much a Thai folk toy. And so my relatives accepted this was the way I had come in, and they allowed me to dress the way they wanted. I even had a relative who made me an outfit that had a shirt collar and short pants, button up, and it was perfect. I loved it. It was in Thai cotton, traditional with Thai design. It was a shirt that men would wear, boys would wear on holiday or just casually. And so they indulged me in that sense for just to please me. But then we had obligations to represent the family. And in my case, because my family was courting royal favor, my grandmother was courting favor with the royal family. And so there was always a fashion show at the palace across the street, a minor palace, not the grand royal palace. And so all the children of the aristocratic class were invited to come and be in this fashion show. It was my kindergarten that set it up. So I had to wear the dress that my grandmother picked out. And because it was such a sort of ceremonial presentation of the children of our class, I didn't even think to object. I was just like, okay, I'm part of this class, part of this society, and it is an honor to wear a dress and walk down this aisle in front of the whole community. Because I knew that this wasn't really me I was presenting. It was actually my family and my family name and social standing. But then at home, I could do what I wanted.
Yeah.
I took photos. When I first got a camera, I set it, got my tomboy friend to help me, and had got my outfit on that was a sailor's outfit, and had her take pictures of me pretending to row a boat and pretending to be a sailor. And I totally thought that I was a sailor, like a man, a sailor. But then when I got the photos back, I was like, it just looks like a kid. A kid wearing a costume. So in that sense, I learned to play with gender. Most of our clothes, we didn't have off the rack clothes then. Most of our clothes were made by local seamstresses. So everything was really made to order. There was no going to the boys' department to pick out clothes or going to the girls' department. It was all going to the dressmakers to get something made. Or you could buy children's clothes also in the market that made by freelancing seamstresses. And my mother would buy me the trousers with pockets that I wanted that were clearly made for a boy. And she was a tomboy herself. So, growing up in the rubble of bombed out London, you basically had to be tough anyway. So it was an advantage to be a tomboy at the time.
British culture and Thai culture. I know British culture better than I know Thai culture, and I know British culture has a relationship with class that's pretty deeply embedded, and it's just kind of a part of their culture for a really long time. It sounds like Thai has there's tiers to society, and that's kind of a stable formation. Then what I'm thinking about, because of the work that I do on my channel is kind of investigating like the spread of cultural Marxism or various different Western ideas that try to destabilize hierarchy, destabilize social order in order to free people or to emancipate people from all forms of order. And there's kind of two kind of things that you're making me think of is gender. In my point of view, I use the term gender in a positive sense as just the social stabilizing formality of sexed, the sexed reality. Sex reality, men and women have different functions, have different proclivities, have different kind of value sets, and those are very deeply embedded in our biology and in our drives in the world, and then what is expected to happen to us. And so societies, cultures develop ways of harmonizing the male and the female and putting them into these categories of, the masculine and the feminine. And there's a lot of variation in how cultures express that. The same thing, I think gender is a social contract. It's a very necessary part of how society functions because we are sex beings. Also class, I'm not allergic to class. I'm not allergic to, I'm lower middle class, but I can see it as an American as a porous thing where I can kind of act and behave and plug into different kind of class structures, but class structure is just a necessary way of organizing society from my point of view. So I bring that up because if Thailand preserved its class and preserved its culture through this, dealings with the West, I'm wondering how it's preserved its sense of stability, its sense of class when meeting different Western ideas of destabilizing class, of Marxism, of socialism, how it kind of shaped up to that. And that's a big question. I also want to understand Thailand's relationship to gender roles, how they formulate gender roles, gender expectations, how rigid those are, how flexible those are, and just how Thai people, Thai folk relate to themselves as gendered or as sexed beings.
Yes.
And then where somebody like you from a third gender, which isn't a political concept, it's just a way that your culture has naturally developed a relationship to gender nonconforming and homosexual. Like your take on that and what you've learned about yourself and about your culture being in that very special position.
Right. Well, that is quite a bit to chew on.
I do that.
Yes.
But I waited 40 minutes before I sprang it on you, so...
Yes, Thai people are very grounded and centered in their Thainess. So when something from the West comes along, they receive it and reject it at the same time. In the sense that if it's trendy and it's fashion related and it has to do with material goods, cars and watches and purses, they're all for it. They have fabulous shopping malls that are just like entire cities within this air-conditioned building to dispense all those status items. But then when you get down to it, their spiritual and psychological home is with Thai Buddhism, Thai animism, Thai culture, and traditions. They are so rooted that no one would even think to break it down. The language of speaking Thai, first of all, we don't have more than one pronoun. There's just the one pronoun for everybody. We have various ways to ask, is it a boy or a girl? We don't even have man, woman, girl, boy. It's just girl or boy. So it's a very basic language. It describes material reality. It has no euphemisms for very basic bodily functions. So it's hard to persuade a Thai to take on something that's cerebral and philosophical. When I first got to college in the US and I wanted to take a class in philosophy, and I learned about the Cartesian split between mind and body, I was just like, forget it. Makes no sense at all. So, in that way, it's hard to convert a Thai to these Western constructs, because it still comes down to, we were born into this body, we have to deal with it. And so Thailand is also kind of known to be a society of conflicts, but it's only that way if you're looking at it from a Western viewpoint. So hard to explain. Anyway.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Could you open up on that? That's really fascinating. A society of conflicts.
Yes. For instance, we're known to be peace-loving and almost passive. Yet we have a very aggressive kickboxing sport.
Okay.
And there's also other aggressive sports like cockfighting and fish fighting and, any two things that could be made to fight. And you can sit around and watch and take bets. And the kickboxing...
society of contradictions.
Yes.
Yes, okay, yeah, okay.
And
what about the contradictions in... Oh, really?
I mean, it's outlawed now, but that originally was, a kick to the head could just break the neck. And so...
Yeah.
That was the original sport. And death-defying ideas, like there was this huge swing built in the center of Bangkok. The poles are still there. They're very ceremonial-looking red poles with gold, and it's like 50 feet high. And from that, they would suspend a swing. And the whole idea was to swing on that and try to, I don't know what even the goal was, but it was quite dangerous to be swinging so high. I was never told the rules, but I drove by that monument so often, I would think to myself in my child brain, what would it be like to swing from that swing?
Yeah. So,
in a sense, those are the contradictions. Mm-hmm. That didn't seem to strike Thai people as contradictions, but just as sort of expressions of human desires to compete, and there's always this element that when you're competing, you are asking the favor of the gods to allow you to win. So there's a lot of luck involved. Mm-hmm. They love gambling for the same reason, because it's a game of luck. And there's so many different amulets and spirits that you can pray to ask for luck for certain situations. So in that sense, it's a culture that is so untouched by Western philosophy that it's been allowed to just exist.
And yet something in it allows it to be in good relationships with foreign countries. Something like you were saying about that king, something about him and his politic and probably his whole court and just the attitude of Thai culture was able to extend and invite and allow people to come through, be non-offensive, and yet to kind of like water off a duck's back, just like let these other cultures come through. We're going to swim through your culture, but we are our own. We are ourselves.
Yes, right. And we were a monarchy until the 30s, and then a coup took place, and the parliament was set up, modeling itself after the British.
Okay.
And in this way, we had a semblance of democracy. But we are also a culture that is chronically going through coups. You know, if you have followed Thai history at all, it is just riddled with coups, because democracy was they were too impatient. You know, the side that lost would be too impatient to go through the democratic process. So it was a very expedient way to kind of step in and change the order.
Yeah.
And it met with various levels of non-resistance, mostly non-resistance to out and out marching in the streets to choose sides. I mean, just to understand Thai politics, even Thai people hardly understand Thai politics.
Probably best for them. I think America would be better off if people just forgot about the politics to a certain extent.
Exactly. Because in the end,
ourselves.
It's still the same.
Yeah.
It's still
power.
The powerful who are in charge. And if the peasants on the farm get anything at all, it is through the generosity of those in power.
Yeah.
And after the last political unrest, there was a great deal more attention paid to the provinces. If you've read what's that children's book series, The Hunger Games, it's all about this central city that has everything, and then the provinces have almost nothing, and then they're made to compete with each other. Well, the Thai population recognized themselves. When I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is just like Bangkok and the provinces. So the last political coup, the side of the farmers adopted the symbology from the Hunger Games. And that whistle, the tune,
Oh, really?
that to use to signal who they were. And this is just what makes Thailand so interesting to watch, because they've used Western symbols. They've used Harry Potter as symbols for certain movements, student movements, whatever. It's just a way to cast themselves into a Western storyline to fight for freedom. That's a popular one.
Freedom, yeah, it is very popular. What about gender roles? Like, are women held back, contained, subservient, seen as lesser, or is there more parity among the sexes?
No,
has there always been more parity?
The women in my family were very powerful, and they ran the family. My grandmother was like, what she said was the lay of the land. Okay. And she had a job with the government. She was basically a cross between the facilities manager of the government house. So she made sure that it was all beautiful and functioning, and it had flower arrangements and food was served. And she was also on a committee to welcome foreign dignitaries. So she would research the foreign dignitary, find out what foods they like to eat, what their preferences were, and then make sure that they had all that, and how they were to be greeted, and all of the protocol. So she was very powerful in that sense, especially in my mind, because she met all these very famous people. There's a picture of her shaking hands with Neil Armstrong, and another of her in a long lineup receiving Queen Elizabeth. So that certainly made an impression upon me, that the women were powerful in my family. And my aunt was managing director of our family business, which was in Venetian blinds, imported from Australia and assembled in Thailand during the 60s. Everything was Venetian blinds. And we could branch out to doughboy pools, so everybody could put a swimming pool in their yard for fairly cheaply, and other ventures like that. So she was also powerful in the sense that she networked with all of the Bangkok businesswomen, and she knew everybody, and she was president of the Women's Business Network. So women tended to control business in Bangkok.
Okay.
They weren't stay-at-home moms, because we had staff for that. We had nannies and staff. My mother, she got a job with an American advertising firm, to help transnational corporations like Esso and Coca-Cola and Lux soap, whatever it was that wanted to capitalize on the market in Southeast Asia, would come through this advertising firm. So she had quite a high-up job. I call it her Mad Men days in advertising. And she was handling accounts, and doing surveys of the whole city, going to every home asking if they had a radio and a TV or whatever. So to me, growing up in this, it was like these women are definitely working in high positions, and my father worked for the military. So it was sort of divided like that. The men gravitated towards government, being elected and being in government or being in the army, and that's how the power was stratified.
Yeah. And women were more entrepreneurial, more business-oriented.
Oh, yes. They ended up owning the hotels and the...
Wow.
Franchises, all sorts of businesses. Cookie empires.
How did your mom fit into that, moving over there? What did she end up doing with herself while you were a kid?
Well, that's what I was saying. She was in advertising.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So she was.
Yes.
Yeah.
She had a. My grandmother got her a job teaching, because that seemed the obvious thing. She had been a teacher in England, and so it seemed natural for her to be a teacher and teach English. But she didn't like it at all, because the teaching is all memorization and repeating everything you say. So she happened to, through her own relationships, friendships with other expats, find this job in advertising.
Okay, yeah.
Which is what got her to the U.S. once we immigrated. She got a job in advertising in San Francisco. My father also had to get a job in order to rank high in the immigration protocol.
Yeah. What did he end up doing when they moved? And why did they decide to move?
Why did they move? My mother, she didn't intend to stay in Bangkok forever. My father just said, I have to go home to pay back my school fees because the Army, Navy paid for it. And we don't really have to stay very long.
Okay.
And very long became 7 years. And by that time, my mother was like, I don't really want to raise my child in this sort of repeating everything and doing exactly what society had described.
Okay.
So she was the one who lobbied for us to move to the U.S. And my father, she persuaded my father to work for an American company, which happened to be based in the Bay Area. It was part of Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. It was a think tank for engineers, mostly working in defense, but also where all the other technology was coming out of. It was Stanford Research Institute at the time.
Wow.
And is now SRI International.
Your father, he went to school in England. He went through all the school in England, so his English was not a problem for him moving to America.
It was largely not a problem. He would never really fully grasp English
subtleties
to discuss. Yes. And my mother, of course, she was raised on Shakespeare, and she loved the English language, and she passed that on to me, and she loved
you were always bilingual then?
Yes. English was my first language, and then when I got to Thailand, I picked up Thai. But my mother didn't want me to go to Thai schools, so I was educated in the English expat schools, which were very highly academic, but there I would be learning English money, living in a culture that was using a completely different system. So my childhood, my upbringing was all about subcultures moving between one culture and another culture and trying to figure out how to manage that. So when I look at social issues, I tend to see it from an outsider point of view and ask questions like, is this society want to go in this direction? Is it recreating itself along new paradigms that will require the whole society to operate under these new rules? And it also allowed me to see it for what it was. If something was coming up that just didn't make sense to me per material reality, I would just be like, I'm not going with this. This is a belief system. I'm not going along with this whole idea that you can have a gender identity, you can have whatever you want, basically.
Yeah. Well, and then everybody has to, reconfigure themselves to you. So just fast forwarding to it, through your childhood a bit to being in the Bay Area, realizing in high school that you're most likely going to be a lesbian. And then you mentioned something in the very beginning of our conversation about the gay rights movement getting steam. So you were there kind of on ground zero, really close to what became the modern gay rights movement, which has changed over the decades. So could you, and it's really interesting to have you come from a different country, and then also you're already bicultural to begin with. You get to America. America is America. How did you adapt to the schooling here and the culture here? Was it culture shock for you, or?
It was a huge culture shock, but because I was already spoke English, I had no trouble going to school. The only difference was I didn't know decimal points. So that was just like 5 minutes of explanation.
Oh, interesting.
So I integrated.
So you were about 10 or 11?
Yes.
Okay. Fourth or fifth grade, I guess?
Yes, I came in fifth grade. And I was often teacher's pet because I was so used to being, we revered our teachers in Thailand.
Yes,
so it was a natural fit. And it was also the beginning of the civil rights era. So I learned all about Black culture and Black civil rights. And, I thought we had this race problem solved in America. And I fit myself into that paradigm, that race, white, non-white paradigm of what was going on in the civil rights era. And then as far as culture shock, I just couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't figure out why I was sometimes so angry and felt so. Looking back, I would say I was grieving my Thai culture, because my Thai family, because only my mother and father came with me, but I was used to living with my entire family.
Yeah.
And it was 5 years before I could go back and see him. And a letter.
And you went from a really enmeshed, very complex, just tons of people, tons of relatives all around you, to this kind of tiny little unit. Just mom, dad, and me.
Right. And they, it was like we hardly knew each other. We were so buffered by the rest of the family. So I, tried to help. I fit in. I did chores. I tried to do what my parents said. I wasn't a rebel. Exactly. So, and also my mother very much carried her British heritage, her British no-nonsense child-raising methods with her. And she then went back to school to get her master's in psychology, her MFCC, Marriage, Family, Child Counselor.
Okay.
So I was raised, I then learned alongside her what was child development, what stages and what you could expect from a child. And she did all the tests that you give to children. She practiced on me.
Oh, no. You're your little lab rat.
Yes. Sometimes I felt like a lab rat. But yeah, she would give me M&Ms as part of the test. You got this right, so you get an M&M. It's very behavior modification style at the time.
Huh.
You're frozen there.
It's coming through okay for me.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes. So, the culture shock, it took me writing my book, the first book about Thailand, to really understand what the difference was in culture that I had to manage. And also American Buddhism helped a lot. I began to attend a local Buddhist meditation group and listen to the Dharma talks. And I'd hear them and I'd be like, that's just what we learned in Thailand. Only it's translated into English. So now I could understand that there was a difference between the Western Christian paradigm and this Asian culture that I had come from. And that helped a lot.
And how did you resolve the alienation of being a stranger in a strange land at 10? Did you plug into school well? Did you make friends well? Or did you kind of tend towards loneliness?
Well, I didn't like my original school, my public school at all.
Yeah.
So I lobbied my parents to send me to a school that I could relate to. And I was enrolled in a private school, which had the same academic and classical structure as the schools I had attended in Bangkok. So once I entered the private school, I was fine. There were other immigrants there too who had run into the same problem with the public school system not being quite as vigorous as they were used to academically. Mm-hmm. So going to school in these private schools, I was so grateful to be there. And we wore uniforms just like we wore uniforms in Thailand. So all of that felt much more like home to me. And so I continued. I went to a girls' school for high school. And that was vigorously academic. We were prep school to Ivy League college system. So it was at a time when women were beginning to understand that we could have careers. So the school was helping us to see ourselves that way.
Okay, yeah. That's just also an interesting subnote with, because you had already understood that women can have careers, but it sounds like, just to extrapolate what you're talking about with your mom and your grandmother and your aunt, they were all of the aristocratic class, so they could afford to hire women to do the house stuff, the domestic stuff. They could hire servant stuff, and then they could focus on careers. In America, we don't have that really stable class system. So the broadening of women having careers to the middle class was kind of a novel. It was a culture shift for us, whereas the aristocracy could always be a little bit more involved in entrepreneurship or whatnot, but that broadening of who could have a career, the broadening of the less class-oriented Americana change in the gender is a little bit different mix than what you were describing in Thailand.
Yes. In fact, it became much more apparent to me in the States that women were getting half the opportunities, it seemed like. I couldn't get a paper route.
Oh, okay.
That was such a classic job, and for some reason I really wanted one. I wanted to ride my bike through the streets, flinging things into people's yards. But it wasn't available to me. And there were so many other barriers that I recognized as a child. The Girl Scouts, they went camping, and the fathers came to put up the tents. And this was so not what my mother's Girl Guides had been like, that I was just pulled towards my tomboy side. And by 8th grade, I was saying, I wish I were a boy.
Oh, okay.
Clearly, this...
So the American rigidity around gender roles that you met caused you some form of social dysphoria. To just
Yes.
kind of to play with that word a little bit. Yeah.
Right. So, but because I came of age in the feminist time, I was being told that I could do things that were not usually a woman's career if I wanted to. So that kind of compensated for the whole dysphoria around being in this gender, this sex that was so limited. It was compensation, and there was still the issue of being same-sex attracted and becoming involved in the lesbian and gay community. That was also an adjustment.
When did you discover this lesbian gay community?
My first summer out of college, I started to explore San Francisco and find the gay community. I went to the first, for me, my first gay freedom march was in 1979.
Okay.
Which was just about the beginning of gay liberation coming onto the scene on the heels of civil rights and the women's movement. So there was a momentum already for this kind of civil rights struggle and coming to be accepted in society. And because I was already out to myself much earlier than my peers at the time. Women were not recognizing their homosexuality until at least in college. So that I should see it in high school was, I would say, because of my Thai heritage had already informed me that this was very likely a path. So I was already ahead of the game. I didn't carry the internalized homophobia that my peers did. So I was able to be more open and more visible. So my task, once I became involved in the gay community, was to persuade people around me, people at work, that I would come out and that I was not scary. I was unexpected because I didn't look like what they imagine a lesbian would look like. I kept my hair long because I wanted to hang on to my Asian culture, my Asian looks, and it was easier to present as long hair and look like an Asian woman. had I cut it short, I would have looked like a boy, a man, and that would have kind of defeated the purpose of my gender goals, I suppose.
Yeah. So, okay, you brought up something that's just interesting. So, what you were just describing now, at the dawn of the gay rights movement, women weren't. You just said women weren't recognizing their homosexuality until college, and you were ahead of the game, so you had a little bit more time to, I guess, adjust to yourself, to be comfortable with yourself. What's happening now is that kids are being foisted at 9, 7, 8,
exactly.
9 into choosing a sexuality before anywhere before sexuality is anywhere naturally developing and stuff. So there's got to be a way that we can look maybe at the way that Thailand provided you self-awareness in a proper way, maybe just in a cultural way, without like it becoming indoctrination like we do now, celebration, and, you know, like making it like this whole rite of passage that is just foisted on children way before they're ready. Right.
Yes.
And I wonder if hopefully the whole pride thing that's gone so far now is without like terrible backlashes, just kind of stops becoming such a central feature of our entire culture and just becomes something that is just kind of in the background. This is just a part of the human experience. We don't need to celebrate it. We don't need to shove it down each other's throats all the time. So I'm throwing those things out. It seems like you were a little bit more well adjusted, or you're giving me a glimmer that maybe Thailand is better adjusted to variations and human sexuality and preparing individuals to go down different paths, that America's kind of bungling in our, like, we just have to America it, we have to corporatize it, we have to brand it, we have to make it a big statement. Just wondering what you think about those thoughts.
Yes, I certainly feel that way. The whole gender non-conforming, equating to being the opposite sex or neither, is truly a bungling of in my cultural knowledge. It is just rewriting what to me was a natural expression into a whole different paradigm that assumes that human beings are born wrong. And how can that be? And also, if born wrong and we want to fix it, how can you fix it with just these plastic surgeries and crude workarounds, using drugs to bring out secondary sex characteristics, using drugs to stop puberty and thus stop the development of the human body? This is just so outrageous to me. It is really what motivates me to speak out about it. Because basically it's lost touch with reality. It's completely made up, and it's made up from so many different sides. Like on the academic level, there's this whole deconstruction. Again, mind separated from body. You could do anything with your mind. So you could create any stories you want to say, well, gender is to be subverted and we must break down and go as far as to manipulate our bodies to fit whatever we want. There seems to be no foundation, no firm structure under which to raise this belief system. And I think it is wrong to try to force children to state what their gender identity is, rather than just let them explore and be neither one thing or the other until they're ready. And it's all because of the gender nonconforming piece of it. We've always had gender nonconforming children, people. It just depends on what story you're going to hang on it.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
The story of reincarnation is a belief system, and it served me well to embrace it. I still believe in reincarnation, but I acknowledge that this is a belief that cannot be proven and shouldn't be made into a state religion, which is what we're seeing now with going on now.
Yeah. What I gave some. We met a few weeks ago at an event that I spoke at, and you made me think about how your culture deals with, the variation in gender expression, let's say, or the outliers, the margins. And with the story, I said this in my talk, that the story of reincarnation gives you this ability to say, okay, I might have a male spirit, or maybe my spirit or my soul has been imprinted by my male experience in my past life, and that's carrying over here, and now I'm kind of male in a female body. And it allows two things, which the gender ideology is not serving. It's bringing up these questions. It's not it's not answering these questions in an efficient way, I think. And then it allows for some pretty negative outcomes. But in the reincarnation story, it gives you a personal, it gives you a framework to say, I am as I am, and there's a meaning to me being this way, and it's just how I am. And so I have to, and then it gives you a sense of purpose. Like, I have to figure out the lessons, and, I have to go through this, and I have to learn how to accept myself, because the lessons are always about becoming more real, becoming more me. It gives you like this transcendental path towards individuation or self-ownership without denying yourself. It's like, I'm different than everybody else. And then something else that you said when we met the other week was that everybody around you also recognizes you, and they have a way of relating to you, say, okay, you are a female, we're not going to deny that, but there's something male about you, and so we're going to allow you wiggle room to express that and learn that, but we still have expectations of you staying in certain, there's certain safeguards, and then certain without demeaning the person or putting them down necessarily. The person's respected for their individuality. And then the person is also expected to respect society and the structures of society without destabilizing everything. And what we have here is, in certain respects, there's a lot of different things there's a lot of different irons in the fire, different motivations that are pushing the gender ideology movement, from, vested interests to academic theories stuff. But one of the more kind-hearted reasons why it's being pushed in schools is that we want to save kids from being bullied. Right? We want to protect kids from being bullied. We don't want the marginalized to be oppressed, right? And that's a noble thought, but in our typical fashion, Western American fashion, we go overboard, and we're gonna start to bully people in order for people not to be bullied. We're gonna start to force everybody to accept the most marginalized in order so that nobody's gonna be marginalized. And so we're going to marginalize the normal person. We're gonna put the normal person down. We're gonna say the normal person's the oppressor, the normal person's the weird one, and they're responsible for all the pain. So we totally overshot the mark insofar as we were trying to make society more accepting of the marginal or the gender nonconforming. We've overstepped the mark and kind of broken the wheels on the bus in our pursuit of that. So it's just, it seems like there's something about the way that you were expressing and the way that you're talking now that has a more balanced frame of reference that I think would be much more healthy, especially for the gender non-conforming, like these detransitioners who get it in their head that they need to escape their body and do incredible damage to themselves, and then have to live with that. They wake up, they're 20, they're 25, and their body's been irreparably harmed by the pursuit of this thing that they just, all they needed to do was to learn to accept themselves rather than to deny themselves in the pursuit of self-acceptance, ironically.
Yes. And it is a combination of having to negotiate being a woman, coming of age as a woman, and all of that entails, especially in today's social media, body, everything's about how you look on the tiny screen, and having to negotiate the sexualization of being a woman. And then there's the homosexuality part of it. We're failing to acknowledge homosexuality in our haste to validate this gender non-conforming presentation that is being scripted to be that there's a gender identity, a gendered soul, as it were, and then to imply that this should be fixed with medical means. I mean, this is just who is it serving? I mean, you just have to ask the question, well, if there's always been gender non-conforming kids and people, how did they survive before? You know, weren't they just accepted for who they were trying to be? But no, now we have to be so focused on how we make our body look. This seems to be just so wrong on so many levels.
From your Buddhist perspective, how is that wrong, or how is that violating the order of things?
Well, Buddhism acknowledges that the body ages, suffers, and dies, so we have to learn to handle that. We have to accept these premises, accept that we're in the body that we're in, that it's going to suffer because of physical harms and illness. That is a premise of Buddhism, is that because the body is so susceptible to physical harms, we can't really control it. So we have to control our minds and our anxiety about it. And just sit, the whole meditation process is all about breathing in and focusing on the breath. And what could be more embodied than focusing on the breath? Buddhism was never really presented with this idea that you could change sex by operating on the body. So I wouldn't be able to say that there were answers to this question of how does Buddhism handle this. I can only really say that Buddhism's focus is on not being so self-focused, not being so concerned of yourself. I mean, one of the goals is to reach no self. And I can't begin to explain what exactly that means, because that wasn't really a goal of my childhood Buddhism.
Yes.
my childhood Buddhism was mostly about accepting the way things are. It's just like the Serenity prayer. You know, God help me to accept the things as they are and to change the things that I can. I'm mangling the whole prayer, but that when I saw that as a child, I was just, as a teenager, I was just like, now that describes exactly what I see East meeting West. The East is all about accepting and fatalism and going along with whatever, and the West is about doing what you can to relieve the suffering of the things that you cannot change. So I actually get along very well with people who have been through AA. And, you know, that is never brought up in terms of gender. We have too much of the whole narration of suicide, whatever.
Yes. God grant me the strength to accept the sex that I cannot change.
Yes, yes.
and the willingness to
Yes.
to change the things about myself that relieve my stress.
We need a gender AA.
Yes, yes.
Gender anonymous.
Oh, geez, yeah. If only gender was more anonymous, right? Yeah. I am he, him. Hi, he, him. And here's my story.
Right.
So you have a book, The Unexpected Penis, salacious title,
Yes,
Conversations on the Gender Trail. And you also have other books about your childhood growing up and stuff. The Unexpected Penis, which is a great title. You have you gave me an advanced copy. Is this published?
Yes,
now
it's now
people
available.
Okay.
I published it with the Amazon platform, so that's where it can be found.
And in this book, what do you cover? It's a lot of what we've already covered, but your conversations on the gender trail. What do you speak about in this book for those who are interested?
I talk about third gender culture as a way of seeing gender. I talk about...
And third gender culture isn't some sort of fetishized Western point of view. You're talking about what we talked about here, about different indigenous societies, other non-Western societies' relationship to the gender non-conforming male and the gender non-conforming female, and how those cultures dealt with that and allowed those people landing place in a place in society, rather than upending society like we're some people are trying to do right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and we never denied biological sex, which is really annoying when the Western version is, oh, well, there's always been a third sex or multiple sexes, but it isn't true. It was a construct that we could inhabit, but we never denied that biology was more than two sexes.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's... The book is a memoir of my journey to understanding what Western society, American society, was trying to develop in changing the language and introducing pronoun preferences and all of these things, and in trying to introduce new interpretations of biology to try to persuade people that that sex was on a spectrum, or that there was more than two sexes, because there's intersex. So I have a whole chapter describing why this intersex piece of it is just not what we're given to believe by this narrative.
Yeah.
And
And what
then
particularly, in looking at all of this and studying all this, and then putting yourself through a first-person perspective, what kind of solutions or paths forward do you recommend and that you feel the need to share?
The solutions, you know, we're in the middle of it. So, I mean, my solution would be to keep the binary, keep the material reality in our definitions of what the sexes are, because otherwise it becomes completely chaotic, and you can't defend sex-based rights, you can't defend medical knowledge because female bodies are different from male bodies. You can't defend crime statistics. So my attempt to explain how we got here is to show that this wasn't a new discovery. This isn't a coming out of people who would have suppressed their gender identity before. This is a created narrative that has come to us through all the channels we trusted before. And there was only a few people in charge at the time, and no one thought they needed to police this. So once I understood all of those components, then I was able to see that this is just a construction. And the people who are used to following the chains of trust in their organizations and their careers, their disciplines, need to stop and come out and say something. But of course, at this point, it is so difficult to step out, and because you get so much trouble. I mean, I didn't want to write this book in the beginning. I was like, over my dead body, why would I bring such trouble upon myself? And that was in 2019 when I first heard that young girls were thinking that they were boys now. So, and were trying to make themselves into boys. But the cultural information was coming so hard to support this whole new narrative that I was overwhelmed by it. And I was also in the middle of writing my own memoir of my own non-conforming childhood. And I just wanted to make space for that, for telling the whole story that I've told to you a lot of. And so once I got finished with that book, and I didn't say anything about trans ideology in that book at all. I just wanted to keep it to be my own story of my own time. But I had to understand the information in order to make that space for myself. I didn't want people to immediately think, oh, she was a gender non-conforming child. She would have been trans today, or she really is trans. And then I realized that's what children think now, that they must be trans. So in reviewing my own gender nonconformity and seeing what was happening to children today, I realized that this was just a topic that I had to get my mind around. And I spent so much time doing it and also talking to people. That's why it's called Conversations on the Gender Trail, the subtitle, so that I could understand what people were trying to adopt as their reason for going along with this. And we've now have so many more people who want to show how thin these reasons are, from the biology to the theology of it. And then, of course, the hazards, the harm that these sex changes are actually doing to the body. And it's one thing to do as an adult, that's just more of a plastic surgery. But for a child to have these treatments mangle their development to full human beings, to a fully functional human being, that to me is just wrong-headed, wrong way. Thailand has a law. I mean, we're the sex change capital of the world, right? And our LGBT communities persuaded the government to pass this law not to give this sex change treatment to minors because they change their minds. Isn't it
Do you know
obvious?
when that law was passed?
I think it was maybe 2014.
Really?
There
Oh,
were,
wow.
there was no need before because nobody would be so daft as to allow children to be treated this way. But then people from overseas were coming, and I think the last person who got in there was the woman who started Mermaids in...
Susie Green, is that?
Yes. I think it was her child, Jackie, who went to Thailand and had this sex change done, and the Thai people were kind of horrified. It must have made the news because, I mean, that's what I hear through the grapevine, was that Thai people couldn't understand why a mother would do this to a child. I mean, mothers in Thailand of the third gender, men mostly, who go through the sex change, it wouldn't have been their idea. They came to accept.
Boy.
Yes. I mean, the job of a mother is to protect the child and make sure he or she develops into a whole human being. And because Thailand is so used to this cross-dressing, we understood that as long as society accepts that they are the way they are, there is no suicide factor. The actual sex change operations themselves are just enhancements, performance enhancers of this presentation. So, right, that's that is because I was so strong in the way that I could see this as an outsider and as someone informed by such a culture. I could gear myself up to present this information in an accessible way. I mean, this is a small book, so it's not intimidating.
Yeah, no.
It's easy to get
Very
into.
Well written. Yes.
People don't have to agree with me. You read a memoir to see what a person thinks, and you're allowed to make your own judgment about whether this person has a viable narrative, whether they can be trusted as a narrative, whether they have information you might not have. And so the book allows you to peruse the territory without committing to actually saying, well, I need to look into this and I need to research further. It's more like, well, let's just see what an LGBT native actually has to say about this movement, who's a lesbian and a gender nonconforming lesbian at that, what is that perspective? And might she have some good points, or is she stepping over the line? So by that medium, by this memoir medium, I am hoping that people will entertain what I have to say, and be entertained, because I wish to be a good storyteller.
You are, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So I really appreciate you giving me your time, and it was great to meet you in California, and then to have you back on, because I do think that conversation is one of the ways that this is going to unravel or give people more space to think things through outside of the political cockfight that
Yes.
occurs in popular culture. Taking bets, betting your portfolio and your retirement savings on if gender affirming care is just going to pay your way to the Bahamas and back. So it's wonderful to have you on, and I'll definitely link your book. And how can people connect with you otherwise? Do you have much of a presence on social media? Is there anything else that people throwaways that people can connect with you?
I kept my writing on this mostly to my book. I did have a blog for a while that's still up, amandakovattana.blogspot.com, that follows my journey mostly as an environmental activist. And I'm thinking of starting a Substack just to share the ongoing conversations. So at the moment, I'm mostly found in my books and social media and a little bit of a Twitter. I am under my own name, Amanda Kovattana, so it's easy to find me. That's the luck of having a Thai name, is it's unique.
Do you know Kovattana, what that signifies?
Well, to a Thai, it signifies that I was originally a Chinese family immigrant who is trying to be Thai. Ga is Chinese. Kovattana is a Thai name. So, yeah. So the Chinese who came to Thailand they married Thai wives. So they married into this society. And they took over Bangkok because they were shopkeepers. They weren't allowed to own land.
Okay, yeah. The mercantile class. Interesting.
Yes.
Fascinating. Thank you, and also thank you very much for bringing more. I just like hearing history and stuff. So thanks for bringing up that rich history of your country and stuff. We truly live in a varied world. And if people like open their minds and to other experiences, other ways of looking at things, I think it's really healthy for, especially in politically motivated discourse, or when we're trying to like come to an opinion or really think about, what is a human being? What is a man? What is a woman? To really look at the history of men and women and culture is really important. And we are too impatient often to really take in a wide variety of points of view and historical realities. So it's always very enriching to have that in the conversation.
Thank you. It was an unexpected journey. I didn't expect to quite go into this depth about Thailand and the history and all of that. But I hope that it is a way in for people to be interested in other cultures, especially here in the States, which is such an insular culture.
Yeah, America. Well, Amanda, I'm going to end the interview now. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
There we go. And there we go.